Alright everybody, welcome back! So, when I was getting ready to make this video, I was talking to a lot of my friends, and somebody pointed out that in the last year, this is the first fighter that we've gotten as an event vehicle. And sure, even though it is a fighter, it's a sorry excuse for one at best, and I'll be getting onto that here in a little bit. But first of all, I just want to rant for a little bit about how events have been. So for the last year, they have all been attackers, except for one, and quite a few of them haven't even been new attackers. It's been a slightly different variant of an existing one. So for example, last fall event, right, was the Jaguar E, which is just a twin-seat Jaguar. Literally the exact same thing, no differences, and hey, at least it's okay, but still just an attacker with two seats, right? Then after that, we move on to a Tornado. Exactly the same as the tech tree version. The only difference that it loses is normal anti-tank munitions for some anti-ship missiles, which, by the way, don't even work in game. They constantly whiff on the couple AI ship targets that we have. Then they went ahead and added an A7K, which is literally just an A7D, but two-seater. They gave it AIM-9Ls, but they didn't even give it the AGM-65D, so for a very long time it was at 11.0 with the exact same munitions as the 10.3 one, except for the AIM-9. And a thermopod as well, I guess, of course. Last event, we had the SE-25BM, which the only thing it had going for it was R-73s. So it was basically worse at CAS of the same BR than its tech tree contemporaries. It just had the R-73s, and Gaijin just went ahead and gave the SE-39 and the SE-25T the R-73 as well. And of course we also have the MiG-29 SMT this patch. While maybe not necessarily a good platform, it's still a lot better than an SE-25. And now we get an F-100F, so it is at least better than the A7K or the SE-25. But just because it's a little bit better doesn't mean it's actually a good addition. And to be honest, I've gotten really frustrated with not having good event vehicles. The last one I would say I thought was actually an interesting addition was the F4D, and that thing was terrible for a while on release. It's been over a year since that. Gaijin really needs to change how they do event vehicles. There's still so many they could add. You know, stuff like the F-100F, for example, which while it may not necessarily be good, it would at least be unique. And the same thing in this case. Gaijin could have given this thing AIM-9Ps, but they decided not to because they can't give it flares, and they said they didn't want to move it up in BR. And they also said it's probably because they want to have it for CAS. The problem is it's not even necessarily good at CAS, and I'll go ahead and get onto that a little bit later. But for context, the F-100A is already in the Chinese tech tree, and despite what you would think, the A is actually better than the D by a pretty considerable margin, actually. It's got about a 10% thrust to weight benefit over the F-100D, which is in the American tree, right? Which is infinitely useful in ARRB. So when we keep that in mind, the A already isn't like the most competitive thing in 9.3, but it's at least, you know, viable. It's pretty decent. I actually have a video on it recently. The D is pretty bad. It's not necessarily the worst 9.3 that I can think of, but it's not in a good state, and I wouldn't really recommend flying it at all, right? The F-100F is even worse. It's about another 10% worse than the D at the same BR when it comes to flight performance. Now, what Gaijin could have done is gone ahead and give it the AIM-9P to make up for that, maybe put it in 9.7. It still probably wouldn't have been good, don't get me wrong, but at least it would have made it somewhat unique. It would have been an F-100 that has better missiles, right? But in any case, as of now, I can't really recommend this for an ARB player. Like you can see, it has a hard time even dodging AIM-9Es if you don't see them in time, which is pretty pathetic. Now moving on to how it actually performs in game, like I said, it has 80% less thrust to weight ratio than the F-100A, and it's also heavier. So if you've flown that, don't expect this thing to be anything like it. It's much more of a brick. At most normal altitudes and fuel loads, you're going to be hitting about 8 to 9 Gs. Now if you get it low on fuel like I'm doing right here, you can get it up to 10 or 11, but even then, it's not going to be a very good experience. The one good thing I can say about it is that because it doesn't like to pull, it does maintain energy pretty well around Mach. But it also doesn't like to pull, so that doesn't really help you most of the time. The F-100 does of course have auto slats similar to the F-86A, and those will pop out below around like maybe Mach 0.85 or so, and they'll give you a little bit of extra pull, but expect to lose pretty much every dogfight that you get into against pretty much every opponent at this battle rating. you're gonna have to start behind somebody because you can pull some decent AOA, and you can kind of sit back there, but you don't have the engine power and you don't have the energy retention if you get slow. So you definitely want to keep this thing, you know, in the higher end most of the time, where you can use your okay energy retention at higher speeds. One of the changes is that they actually took away 2 of the guns, so as you can see, you don't have nearly as much firepower as the F-100D. You also get less ammo as well, so I was actually running out of ammo relatively commonly when I was applying this thing. That's one thing I'm really not used to having to deal with in the F-100s, and I would highly recommend exercising caution when it comes to your trigger discipline. Tap fire just like you would in the F-86F2, for example. Expect to get more hits and crits than you're used to as well. That's just one of the things that's just going to happen. You do, of course, also get access to 4 AIM-9Es, and these are pretty alright for a 9.3 missile. They have good range, they have decent pull, you know, 10 Gs is okay. Nothing special, but it gets the job done. But they're still not amazing, and honestly, like I said, I really do wish they would give this thing AIM-9Ps, even if they moved it up to like 9.7, for example, like the T2. I think they'd at least make it somewhat interesting and a little bit more viable, because the AIM-9E just really doesn't cut it anymore when you have a platform that's this much of a brick at this BR, unfortunately. Like I said, if you're an air-only player, to be honest, I can't really recommend getting this vehicle. Just get the F-100A and the Chinese tech tree at the same BR, and you'll have a much, much, much better experience. And it doesn't really get that much better when it comes to CAS either. Because they hype it up on the dev blog, but this thing doesn't really get any amazing CAS loadouts. It has pretty much the exact same loadouts as the F-100D at the same BR while still having worse energy retention, and while it's okay and it's definitely better than the F-100A in the same tech tree, 2 bullpups and then 4 bombs is nothing amazing for 9.3. It'll get the job done, don't get me wrong, and I'm not saying it's bad at CAS. Like, I bring it out on my 9.3 lineups, but to be honest, I don't even know if I could say it's worth grinding for CAS. If you remember, the Q5A is 9.0, and it got CCIP recently for its rockets and bombs. This thing has none of that, and honestly, I really think I'd rather take 4 CCIP bombs, plus the rockets as well, compared to just 4 drops of unguided bombs, and then 2 bullpups. This is still not bad, don't get me wrong, but I just don't really see the need to add it in the first place. Like, I really don't get Gaijin's obsession with adding all these twin-seater trainer or attacker versions of aircraft that we already have in the game when there's still a lot of other options. And to be honest, I wouldn't mind it as much if it hadn't been over a year of vehicles like this. It really doesn't incentivize you to actually boot up the game and try and grind it when the vehicles aren't even necessarily good. Especially when they're both not good and not unique as well. And this is not like a one-off thing either. Unfortunately, I doubt this is going to change anytime soon. We can always hope for the best, but I have a stinking suspicion that we're going to have a very similar thing for the winter event as well. Although something like an F-20 would be pretty cool if I'm right about AMRAAMs coming. In any case, so let me know what y'all think of this down in the comments below. Have you been happy with the event vehicles as of late? In any case, I'll catch y'all next time. So, peace, y'all.